Good morning, Kenya. Rise and shine to the morning momentum. Your daily dose of a comprehensive rundown of the top stories making the headlines. It is the 3rd day of February 2026, and this is a daily compendium of local and international news, human interest stories, current affairs, and expert opinion. My name is Alphonce. Ouma. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib Media TV at Alphonse Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the top stories making the headlines on the Daily Nation this morning. On the front page, how 1 trillion Mbadi debt will hit you. Now, Kenya's loans burden has risen to over 12 trillion and higher than the recommended ceiling. The government projects to borrow 1 trillion from the local market, which is nearly the entire 1.1 trillion budget deficit for the 2026-2027 financial year. This is bad news for the private sector, since businesses whose pool of financiers is shrinking fast will struggle even more to secure credit, as most lenders, including commercial banks, opt to loan the government with an eye on guaranteed repayment and higher consistent returns. That story is augmented for you on page 4 and page 5. You have the statistics here. After 24 years in power, Daniel Moi left in December 2002 and the total public debt was approximately 630 billion. Now, Moi Kibaki left when public debt was about 1.8 trillion by March 2013 after 10 years in office. Uhuru Kenyatta left with a public debt that had risen to 8.7 trillion shillings. And now President William Ruto, for 3 years under his tenure, the total debt had crossed 12 trillion mark by November 2025. The state plans to borrow extra 1.1 trillion in the new financial year. That is where we are headed. Now, on page 7 this morning, the bold dream that turned into a nightmare. It's all about CBE, that is the competency-based education. Now, when the government unveiled the new education curriculum, it was billed as bold departure from the rote learning to learner-centered revolution to nurture skills, creativity, and critical thinking. An end to the high-stakes, exam-oriented 844 regime until cracks emerged. That story is augmented for you on page 7. And on page 3 this morning, state sued over chaotic border rain amid Matatu strike. Now, a lawyer has sued the government over the failure to regulate commercial motorcycle operations, which he says has led to widespread road carnage, mob violence, sexual assaults, and destruction of property across the country. That story is augmented for you on page 3 of The Nation this morning. Let's get up close and candid with The Nation on page 2. Commuters bear the brunt of war between matatus and border borders. The recent torching of a bus sparked a matatu strike yesterday, paralyzing city transport. Shielded by politics and weak enforcement, a vital sector now operates with impunity, dispensing its own brand of justice. That story is augmented for you on page 2 of The Nation this morning. On page 3, cautious optimism as Kenya poised for moderate growth. It's all about economy. Forum highlights growth projections, debt concerns, and market funding. Now, on page 3 still, landmark CBA gives clinical officers salaries of up to 338,000 Kenya shillings. Now, clinical officers have signed their first collective bargaining agreement in almost 10 years, marking a major milestone in their pursuit of better pay, recognition, and working condition. 7,000 is the number of clinical officers serving both the public and private sectors, far short of the 24,000 needed to deliver UHC effectively. Now, on page 4, how 1 trillion new loans will hit you, small businesses. Now, this is about financial planning. Increased borrowing from the local market comes as CBK governor and controller of budget raised questions about the government's possible misapplication of the proceeds from quote-unquote ambitious borrowing. Lenders, including commercial banks, will opt to loan money to the government, which seeks to plug its budget gap, given guaranteed repayment and higher consistent returns. Other borrowers will have restricted access to credit. That story is augmented for you on page 4. On 15th February is the date when the budget policy statement prepared by the Treasury is submitted to Parliament for consideration upon approval by the Cabinet. That is in the next 12 days. Now, on page 6 this morning, tragedy. SHA blamed for delayed treatment of injured teachers. They were participating in Kuppet elections. One of the teachers had planned to wed at the end of the year. Now, Teething challenges have emerged 2 months after teachers were onboarded under the Social Health Authority (SHA) in the wake of a horrific road accident along Thika Road on Saturday that has since claimed the lives of 3 teachers. The Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers (KUPPET) yesterday condemned hospitals that declined or delayed to attend to injured teachers, insisting that they pay cash. That story is augmented for you on page 6. On page 7 this morning, CBE shine dimmed by policy planning flaws. The vision was to replace the exam-focused 844 with CBE emphasizing talent, self-reliance, and critical thinking. The competency-based education curriculum initially promised a learner-centered, skills-focused education to replace the rote 844 learning. However, years of poor planning, political interference, teacher shortages, and inadequate infrastructure have undermined that vision. You'll catch up with that on page 7. On page 8 this morning, Kanjama unveils vision to transform LSK. Elections to choose a new president and council for the 2026-2028 term are scheduled to be held on February 19th. LSK faces defining moment ahead of the 2027 general election. That story is augmented for you on page 8 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 10, politics. Uhuru and I to blame for making Ruto Mount Kenya darling, says Gachagua. President Ruto recently toured a region and declared disinterest in being dragged into quote-unquote tribal outbursts. Mr. Kenyatta had greatly in going out in search for Mr. Ruto in 2013. It is through that dalliance that I came to know Mr. Ruto, says Gachagua. And you want to catch up with that story on page 10. Let's move on and take a look at page 12, still on the political scene. Kisumu residents endorse ODM Ruto talks. Your job is safe, Dr. Oburu Oginga tells Professor Kithure Kindiki amid rumors of ODM eyeing the deputy presidency. Oburu says ODM UDA talks will focus on fair and balanced negotiations. That story is augmented for you on page 12. On page 13 this morning, tech overhaul plan targets retiree pension syndicates. There are 300,000 registered pensioners with 20,000 new claims yearly. In the new system, pensioners will submit claims online and receive automated approvals. You'll catch up with that story on page 13. Now, also this morning, many Kenyans doubt Nyota project's impact, InfoTrack survey shows. Now, while 78% of Kenyans are aware of the National Youth Opportunities Towards Advancement, that is the Nyota Fund, a new InfoTrack report reveals that higher awareness has fueled skepticism about the program's impact. The nationwide poll conducted last month shows that despite strong visibility, doubts remain over the fund's transparency, fairness, and cultural reach. That story is augmented for you on page 13. Now, let's take a look at the DN2 Powering SME article this morning. It's all about banana fiber hair extensions. Stems that would otherwise be discarded are processed into fiber and transformed into a range of value-added products such as carpets, baskets, trays, mats, and storage units. You'll catch up with that on the DN2 Powering SMEs article, page 2 and page 3 of that same article. Now, on the county news this morning, we start with Isiolo County. MCS failed to stop forgery investigation. Now, a group of ward reps has failed to hold police investigations into alleged document forgery tied to Speaker Mohamed Roba Koto's June 2025 removal. The High Court dismissed the application, ruling that parliamentary privilege cannot shield suspected criminal acts, including forging or transmitting false documents. 9 members of the county assembly had sought conservatory orders to hold inquiries and summonses by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Director of Public Prosecutions. A story is augmented for you on page 19. In Trans Nzoia County, senators take Natembeya to task over project delays. Senators warn taxpayers may not get value from the projects. Several high-value county projects risk collapse amid stalled works and pending bills. Now, that is augmented for you on page 19. Let's move on and take a look at page 20. Family seeks justice after son lured, killed in Russia-Ukraine conflict. In Riateri village, Bonchari, Kisii County, grief hangs over the home of Clinton Nyapara Mogesa, 29 years old, whose death in Russia has left his family in shock and mourning. Now, also this morning, founder's car crash that led to church's annual pilgrimage. Legio Maria of African Church Mission branched from the Catholic Church to form distinct beliefs and practices. A freak incident involving Legio Maria founder Baba Simeon Melchior Messia transformed Mawego into a hallowed ground. That story is augmented for you on page 20 of the Nation this morning. Let's take a look at the international scene. US and Iran start talks as war shadows Middle East. Peace remains distant with the spectra of conflict still looming. Analysts caution that the talk do not signal a quick de-escalation of tensions. That story is augmented for you on page 22. On page 23 on business news, use of movable assets as loan collateral up by 43%. Central bank survey signals growth in private sector lending, and business registration service data shows growing reliance on assets by borrowers. The figure stands at 19.1%, and the rise in movable property security rights registry searches in 2025 to 30,760. Now, let's take a look at some sporting action as we wrap up the morning momentum this third day of February. We get into the field and take a look at the rugby. Now, this is Sevens rugby. World Rugby Nairobi Sevens at Nyayo is sold out. Fans told not to come to stadium if they don't have a ticket. All 22,000 tickets from SVN's Division 2 next weekend have been snapped up. That's some good news there on page 30. On page 31, let's take a look at football, FKF Premier League. I aim to score more than 20 goals, warns league top scorer Waithira. Ulinzi's Odhiambo is second on the scorers chart with 9 strikes. Productive Muranga striker on 12 goals now says his best is yet to come as he eyes the golden boot. That story is augmented for you on page 31 of the Nation this morning. And on the cover page, CAF Confederation Cup, Nairobi United teen Jewel Duncan Omala now dreaming of Harambee Stars call. Kenyan side mathematically call out of the running for quarters spot after loss in Zanzibar. 19-year-old striker with 2 goals in the African campaign thus far has continued to grow in stature since his under 18 days with Kenya. And with that story of the CAF Confederation Cup, we come to the tail end of the morning momentum this third day of February. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with us and for watching the morning momentum. My name is Alphonce Ouma. See you some other time. Until then, do have a beautiful Tuesday ahead of you. Bye-bye for now.